So the wide receivers at the top of our rankings: Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf. Sean, who are you high on?
Well, I don't like the matchup, but I am high on Corey Davis at just because of his price at 4,800. I think he's way too cheap just after, coming off a couple bad games. That's going to happen for certain receivers in this offense. Just like we said, this is Derrick Henry's offense. But this is a good time to just buy the dip on him. I think he'll spike back up to 5 to 7 targets. So love him on a smaller slate. And then the guy I really like, I actually like all three Steelers wide receivers. We saw last week just how weak this Browns defense is. I mean, Mason Rudolph put up 315 yards against them, and they weren't even trying. So I love investing in as many Steelers receivers as I can this week, but especially Deontay Johnson at 6,200. With him, he's left so many yards and points on the field this year due to drops, but I think he will regress to a more league average drop rate. But his ability to get open is what makes him special and why he's able to see so many targets. So he's the guy I think is going to have a huge playoff run here. So I love getting him at 6,200. And like I said, I think you can make a case for Juju and Chase Claypool. I think the Steelers offense in general, I'll probably have quite a few stacks this week just because this Browns defense is one of the worst ones wild card weekend. So I'm going to be looking to attack it.
Yeah, the Browns did lose Olivier Vernon for the season with an Achilles tear, so they're going to be less effective in the pass rush. And then Denzel Ward, he's going to be someone to keep an eye on. He was out last week because of, I believe, a positive COVID test. He might be able to return this week. So that is something to keep an eye on. Number one cornerback for the Browns. If he's there, it's I don't want to say it's a totally different offense, a totally different defense, but he does improve the defense dramatically, especially because he does shadow. They have used him in shadow coverage recently, but if he's out, Sean, I very much agree with you. The Steelers wide receivers are intriguing, and honestly, even if Denzel Ward is in, probably still interested in the Steelers. You mentioned Corey Davis. I similarly am high on AJ Brown. It's a tough matchup. I think cornerback Jimmy Smith is probably going to return from injury this week for the Ravens, but Brown is just so dominant. Almost 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns in 14 games over the past month. He has a 34% market share of targets. Like the Titans, when they're not handing it off to Derrick Henry, they're pretty much just funneling the ball to AJ Brown in the form of targets. So even with a tough matchup, I do think that AJ Brown has a ton of upside in a game that I think will be pretty high scoring, and we'll see the Titans need to score points. Raybon, who are you high on?
So yeah, I love the calls on the Steelers receivers. I think Chase Claypool, especially, he was talking about last week how Mike Tomlin kind of scaled his snaps back over the second half of the year to protect against the rookie wall. But even last week, we saw him play a high amount of snaps and just keep making crazy plays. So I think they unleash him in this game, and that can really take advantage of the Browns' weaknesses on defense. And then another guy is Marquis Brown. Marquise Brown for the Ravens going against that Titans defense. We saw them get just destroyed by Brandon Cooks, a similar type of player last week. And this Titans defense, they don't get pressure. And so I think Lamar Jackson is going to be able to hang in the pocket. And that's really the issue with Ravens receivers, Andrews, Brown, is that, anytime Lamar Jackson feels pressure, he's going to run. They don't pass a ton. So I think in this game, you have Tennessee who can't cover and can't generate pressure. I think, but can score points on the other side. I think it's a great spot for Marquise Brown to put up one of his, 100-yard games, and love him at 5,400.
Sean, who are you low on?
Well, I think it might go without saying, but Gabriel Davis at 4K. It's unclear if Cole Beasley will be back. I assume he will. But Davis did a wonderful job filling in for John Brown, but John Brown's back, so he's going to see a dip in playing time. Last week he was able to put up a 2-catch for 107-yard line, but that had to do with Beasley being out. So I don't know how much they're going to reduce his snaps, but it's going to be enough for me to fade at 4K if both Brown and Beasley are active this week. And then Terry McLaurin at 6,300. Mclaurin is usually able to overcome horrible QB play, but right now with his ankle injury. He's playing a little bit less than 100%. And Alex Smith does, rob McLaurin's ceiling. It's pretty clear that, Smith tends to favor guys like J.D. McKissick and Logan Thomas. So Terry McLaurin is just not worth his price point, which is unfortunate because he is one of the most talented receivers in the game. But I just can't spend up this much with Alex Smith under center.
Yeah, and the Buccaneers, even if number one cornerback Carlton Davis doesn't play, they're still pretty strong against the pass. Jamel Dean on his own, the number two cornerback, he's having a pretty good year, and I think he would match up against Terry McLaurin for most of the game. So for all the reasons that you highlighted there, and then also just the matchup going against the Buccaneers, the matchup is pretty unkind for Terry McLaurin as well. DK Metcalf is someone I am staying away from. And Sean, you mentioned earlier in talking about Russell Wilson, kind of everything that goes into staying away from him. And I think a lot of that applies to DK Metcalf. He's just not being targeted at the same rate as he was in the first half of the season, and also he's not being targeted as far downfield either. And then now he has a tough matchup. So going against Jalen Ramsey in his 2 games this year against the Rams, DK Metcalf has 2 receptions for 28 yards on 4 targets, and then 6 receptions for 59 yards on 8 targets, no touchdowns. And for 2 years now, we've seen Metcalf really meet his match when he's facing bigger cornerbacks with above average athleticism. So obviously he has a high ceiling because he's, one of the most athletically dominant receivers in the game. But because of the matchup going against Ramsey, who I think is the best cornerback in the league, he also has a much lower floor in this game. So he's someone I would be staying away from. Raybon, who are you fading?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's got to be Metcalf, 43.5 yards a game against the Rams. Seattle talked about this last week on Convince Me. They're just not throwing the ball as much on early downs. I don't know if that changes against the Rams, especially, given the Rams are a little bit banged up on offense. So it's just not one of those kind of games where you expect DK Metcalf to go off. And I think part of it is not even just the matchup or the decreased passing. It's the improvement of Seattle's defense, right? Because earlier in the year, they were giving up 400 or 500 yards, 30 points to everyone. And now you look at Seattle and they're holding teams to, I believe it's about under 20 points per game since week 10. So that just changes the entire game script for the passing game for Seattle. So yeah, DK Metcalf for me.
Sean, give us the wide receiver prop.
Let's go with Michael Thomas and his potential return against the Bears. Right now I have his over-under at 70.5. And obviously that, if we have to factor in if Alvin Kamara will return, all these other things. But right now I have it at 70.5.
I will take the under. I haven't even done a projection for Michael Thomas yet. Because I'm lazy and I'm not 100% sure that he's returning. So I'm not going to make the projection until we have a little more certainty. Sean, what do you think the odds are that he plays this week?
I have no idea. I would put it over 90%. I think
You think so?
made
Okay.
it very clear that he's going to play. And I think that was the plan all along, but I can't say 100%.
Okay. So I need to go back in here, make a projection for him. But in the meantime, I'm still taking the under on the line that you mentioned there. Tough matchup against the Bears, who I think also they've been without 2 starting cornerbacks for the past couple of weeks. I think at least one of those guys will probably return, maybe both of them. And I think Alvin Kamara will also return. So I think just fewer targets to be going towards Michael Thomas.
Oof, that's a good line because I do think he'll get targeted heavily. I'm going to go over. You look at what Michael Thomas has done in the postseason. He's had 3 games over that number and 1 game right at 70, and then one game at 36. But I just think that every time we see Michael Thomas in the lineup in a key situation, he's gonna overwhelmingly get the lead in targets. So and with Drew Brees throwing the football, it's totally different from Taysom Hill. So Brees could complete 25 to 30 passes per game. 10 of those could easily go to Thomas, even if he's not 100%. So yeah, I'll go over.
I feel like Thomas has played way better with Taysom in the lineup.
He has. Yes.
I mean, with Brees in the lineup, he's felt like a wide receiver too, but those 4 Taysom Hill starts, I mean, Michael Thomas is the top 5 wide receiver. So it's interesting to think of, but does Drew Brees almost hurt his value right now, or is that kind of just random?
I mean, it probably is, considering he caught like 150 balls.
Yeah, he was
the year before.
averaging like 8 catches a game with Taysom Hill is insane.
Yeah.
Just massive target share. He wasn't even looking at other receivers. So I think it could just be an anomaly. But yeah, it's interesting to think of.